Welcome to the So You're Ready to Date podcast. I'm Lisa.
And I'm Angie. And here's where we talk about all things dating, love, and relationships. And most importantly, having fun.
Join us for practical advice for dating successfully on your terms.
Welcome aboard
and enjoy the ride.
Hello again. Super excited to be back with another episode of So You're Ready to Date, the podcast. And today we are going to talk about something that I think we all know on some level, but have never really thought about or have had words to describe or have given a lot of consideration to. And that is just the communication differences between men and women. Because I think if we could learn to communicate better and understand our partners better, it's going to make for a stronger relationship. And often, we're women. We like to talk. We use way more words a day than men do. I did not look up that statistic, but I probably should. And I think we sometimes think that we're communicating and then we still don't feel heard. And so today we're going to talk about some differences in those communication styles to maybe help bridge those gaps between us and our partners.
Of course, it makes a funny Facebook meme, right? With the constant miscommunications between men and women. But I think hopefully we're kind of starting to turn this corner when we think about relationships between romantic partners, family, whatever it is, and that communication can take work. And it takes maybe a little bit of thinking and forethought. And it may feel natural to talk, but to actually effectively communicate, listening to your partner to hear what they're saying and to make sure that you're both communicating in a way where you feel heard and understood is a lot more involved and nuanced than just being sit down and listen to me.
No, I think I saw a meme on Facebook, now that you say that, I'm pretty sure it was Facebook, where it says, you could be the best communicator in the world, but if the person that you're communicating to doesn't absorb it, then it doesn't do any good. You have to be able to understand what it is that you're hearing. And I think that is the root of a lot of communication differences in us and our partners and in our relationships, because let's just dive right in and talk about women communicate based on feelings and men communicate to relay information. Generally speaking, not always, but men don't use a lot of feeling words. So when women are talking, the first thing that I want to point out is that men will typically take the literal sense of what you're saying and feel like that is what you're relaying to them, and will turn that around and internalize it and feel like they're failing in the relationship because you're having a frustrating day and are communicating something in a way that they're not understanding.
Yes, it's something that my boyfriend has done a couple of times where he's like, yeah, I'll tell you about this thing. And then you don't kind of respond. So I guess I'm just supposed to research it more. And I'm like, sometimes you have to tell me. I'm telling you this because I think it's cool and I think you should check it out, because I don't know that. I just think you're telling me about something cool you saw on a TikTok. And I'm like, oh, he meant for me to be doing something with this. So, it goes both ways, right? It's this idea that sometimes I'm listening just because I want to hear what is important to you, but you need to communicate. I want you to do X, Y, and Z with this information. And then I'm happy to do it. But I don't know that I'm supposed to be doing that all the time, because that's not always the case. And so it's this fine line of, yes, you could always probably research something or follow the specific path. But I think we've talked about it in past episodes. It's always good to be clear in what you're asking for. You're like, if I need you to do something with this information, then I should tell you to do something with this information.
Yes, but it's also, more of that when women are feeling unheard, they may say, you never listened to me. And one of the things that I was researching today and looking at and getting prepared for this episode specifically talked about that, where it says women will say, you're not listening to me, or you never listened to me. And a man will respond with, well, I'm listening to you right now, but you're still not feeling heard in the relationship because they're not hearing the intent behind your words. They're just repeating back what you said, but they're not really getting that. So I think sometimes when you're talking about that too, you really have to tell them what you're looking for, or if you're not feeling heard in your relationship, or your significant other isn't responding, like you said, in the way that you would expect, to maybe phrase something a little bit differently or say it in different words. Because remember, men are pulling information, women are communicating feelings.
It's such an important point that you bring up, that listening and heard, two totally different things. I can listen to you all day, but to like be heard means that you've absorbed, you understand, you can process the information, and you just didn't hear the words that came out of my mouth. So that's a very big distinction that you need to be having that conversation with. Like, yeah, I can listen, but did you hear, understand, comprehend, and understand what I said?
Right. And I think a lot of times we as women say things that can be taken the wrong way. When you're tired at night and you say, again, another example from the what I was researching here, you come home and you say, "Oh, I'm so tired, I just can't do another thing." Men will oftentimes internalize that and be like, "Well, it's my fault that you can't do anything else because I make such a mess." Or I'm not, or feel like they're not doing enough around the house or doing something like that. And that can frustrate your partner because they're not understanding that you're coming home and communicating that you're tired and need a break. And what you want is a hug and be told to sit down and rest and it's going to be fine. And so those types of communication differences, being aware of them is the first hurdle to overcome, is just understanding that there are communication differences and being able to sit back and go, wait, what are they actually saying? And if I'm not feeling heard, how can I articulate this in a way that's relaying the information that my partner needs to process what I'm saying?
Yes. Like it's a good point, because you're like, it's so easy for, like, in my head it makes perfect sense. Why do you not just get it? Right? I just know what I'm talking about. You should know what I'm talking about. And I think sometimes there's that trap of, the longer you've been with somebody, the more you expect them to just get it. So this is not necessarily a new relationship problem, old relationship, established relationship problem. It's kind of anywhere where you're like, it's going to take some work and some practice to get used to communicating effectively so that both people don't walk away from it frustrated.
Yes, I think back to the early days of my relationship, and I will say that my boyfriend is very quiet, very, very quiet. And I'm not. I like to talk. If I didn't, I probably wouldn't have a podcast. So I really like to speak. And it's hard to have a conversation with somebody who doesn't talk unless they actually have something to say or information. And also, I talk and have learned that women do this, talk to process my thoughts in order to get in touch with my intuition, in order to work things out. The audible aspect of it and me speaking works through that. And sometimes it's kind of hard when you're bouncing off of a blank wall that doesn't communicate back to you, because he's just very quiet. Men typically are more quiet than women. And sometimes we can feel like there is something wrong in the relationship just because they're not responding in the way that our girlfriends would.
Yes, I actually almost have the exact opposite situation to you, in that my boyfriend can talk about just about anything and everything, and I just get to like smile and nod. And not that I'm not an equal partner in the conversation, but he very much, I think, in his day-to-day life, like at work and with his roommates and stuff like that, I don't think he gets the opportunity to just talk. And so I kind of get to hear a lot more of it. But the issue that we've had is that sometimes I have to stop him. I'm like, that's not the question I asked you, because he'll start answering the question, get distracted by a tangent, and then we're talking about something else. And I'm getting better at corralling him back to the point where I'm like, this was a yes or no answer. There's no essay. Do you want to do this or this? And so I think that's the style that we're learning to work with. That for me, he's going to need to pull a little bit more. I need you to ask me specifically because I'm not always comfortable just coming right out and sharing stuff. But if you ask me, usually I won't shut up. But I think it's learning your styles as a couple and how best to communicate. Where, I mean, I don't like to do it, but I will put my hand over his mouth and just be like, for 2 seconds, I need to finish this thought, and then I will let you talk to your heart's content. And we turned it into a joke and not something with any sort of malice. But I think it's about having some fun with your communication styles as well, so that you can come to this point where you can communicate in a way that you both understand and it makes some sense.
Yes, I think that is very important because early in my relationship, I used to have to go, is everything okay? You're very quiet. And he just is very quiet. We can go out to dinner and not speak the entire meal because he's just that quiet. He's just there enjoying the atmosphere, which is now I've come to realize I'll just talk at him and he'll listen and he'll know what I'm saying. He just doesn't have a response for me because he's processing, which goes into a whole nother point of how men process information differently than women do. And women, I just said, women tend to talk out loud to process a lot of information. Not always, but often we talk out loud to process, and men tend to withdraw and go within to process and to solve the problems before they come forward with something to say. At least I think you were explaining that you have maybe an anomaly there. But generally speaking, if we're talking in stereotypes, that is something that men do, is they tend to withdraw into themselves to process and think through problems.
Yes. I think for me, I've always been kind of what I consider an internal processor. And I think it was like, I'd always felt like I wasn't good enough to think fast enough on my feet. So for a long time, I thought it was like this huge deficit in my personality that I'm like, we can talk about this. I'm going to need a day to figure out what this all means to me. And then we can come back and talk again. And because, in typical female fashion, I do get my emotions involved really quick. Because it can go from like zero to traumatized emotions and like nothing flat. But I think it's learning how you communicate is so important so that you can communicate that to somebody else. So knowing if you're like, I think it's a friend of mine who her husband always wants to solve the problem right away. She's like, I just need an hour or longer or sometimes shorter. I just need some space so that I can think and process, and then we can come back and talk about it. And I think you might have mentioned that too, that I just want this solved and done, and we can move on to the next thing where I'm like, not everybody is ready to talk about big things right away. And so learning to give each other some space so that they can process it, so that they can gather their thoughts. So, or maybe your emotions and your feelings can cool down a little bit so they can come back and have a conversation where it's mutually respectful to each other. You're not going to say something that you can't take back, and just being in this space of hearing and not listening just so that you can hurry up and respond and tell them what your thoughts are.
Yes, I think too, Dr. John Gray, who is a relationship expert, and kind of talking about that in general and retreating. And oftentimes, when the other party in our relationship, typically men, but not always, it can be on the other side too. But if you have a person that retreats in order to think and process, it can feel like they're pulling away. It can feel like they're putting distance or space in the relationship. And as women, sometimes we take that personally and feel like our relationship is broken. And it's not. And just knowing and allowing space for the other party to process what they're thinking, knowing that they're going to come back and that the relationship is likely going to be stronger because of it, is a huge step in, again, in opening up that communication and being secure and confident in your relationship and building trust. I know that's also something my boyfriend processes internally. He'll take something and he'll think on it for days. Sometimes it's not a day, sometimes it is days. He is a very patient person. He thinks things through, he thinks through all sides of it. And in the beginning, that was also something that took a little bit of a finesse and a little bit of learning. And even my ex-husband too was one of those people where when he needed to process something, he would pull away. And I didn't realize it. And I see the differences in how I respond in my relationship from when I was married to my relationship now. And it's night and day difference, because when they come back around, it leads to a more solid relationship with more trust built.
You know, as you were talking, I just had this like aha moment. And I think a lot of the way that I process now is because I was single for a long time. So I had no choice but to be an internal processor. And then if it got to a point, then yeah, maybe I'd ask my dad or I'd ask a friend or I'd ask my sister. But I got very comfortable because I had to do it myself, right? I didn't have this partner to lean on, to make decisions with, to discuss everything. And so that's what I'm trying to learn being in a relationship now, is that he wants me to talk about this stuff. He wants to not override my opinion or say that you have to do it this way, but he wants to be a participant. He wants to help. And how he does that is using his like male fix it brain and wanting to be that support. So I think I've got it in my head that it's a burden to talk to people about this. And so it's part of what I'm unlearning in this relationship, is that no, this is what you do. This is what you should want to do, is to talk about this to a person, to have a second set of eyes on something, to get somebody's maybe unbiased opinion because you're too much invested in an answer and in the outcome, and letting them come in and help you and provide maybe some support or an answer or something, so that you have some clarity, or that you just know that you have some support. I think that's something that we miss a lot as well. I didn't realize how nice it was to have somebody just to be come in and being like, yeah, I can help you with this. Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yes, partnership. And sometimes when you've been single for a long period of time, that is an adjustment. And so, totally off topic, we're going to go down a rabbit hole here. But if you've been single for a long time and you're venturing back into the dating world and you have some of this stuff come up and you don't work through it perfectly in the beginning and a relationship falls apart because of it, that's okay. It was a practice run, because if it was the right relationship, you can't mess it up. So just know that if it's the right relationship, you can't mess it up. And it's okay if you learn this lesson slowly or you don't get it right the first time. You can keep trying.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's always the part. You're like, it's not going to go perfect, and to be okay with some stumbling blocks, but to always just keeping those. And sometimes it's important to have been like, hey, I don't know if I'm going to do this right. I'm trying really hard not to mess this up. And sometimes just approaching it with that sense of, hey, this is new for me. I'm going to need some help and some patience, can go a long way when you're trying to work out how to communicate with somebody new.
One of the things that I've done with my boyfriend, again, a while back, was when I didn't know how to say something or communicate something, to tell him, I have something to say and I'm not really sure how to say it. And maybe you can help me say it in a better way, because I've hit some landmines, and I'm not talking little ones. I'm talking explosive landmines, triggers, hot buttons, things, because we've all walked a different path in life. And so once you hit those landmines once or twice, you're like, okay, let's back up and let's talk about this. And so it would come up and it would be, okay, I have something that I really need to say. I really feel like I need to get this off my chest. I need to have this conversation with you. I'm not sure how to best say it. Can you listen to me and then maybe help me figure out how to approach it better in the future? And that actually was a really great way to ease into a conversation and avoid stepping on those landmines and make it okay to stumble a few times.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've had some sensitive topics come up, and I have point blank said, here are my questions for now, but this topic is not closed. I hope you know that because in 3 weeks, another question is going to pop up in my head. And so that has been, I think, very important for us to keep these lines constantly open because, like you said, it's like your boyfriend takes a few days. Well, sometimes in a couple of weeks, a different situation or we've had a different story. I'm like, well, now I have more questions about this topic that we had 3 weeks ago, 2 months ago. So there are sometimes, yes, that a conversation will be done and closed. But I think more often than not, it's kind of like this ongoing thing. It may not come up every day, every week, every month, but there are going to be themes in your relationship that are always going to be there. And so the theme will stay the same. The questions and what you talk about is going to be different. So keeping yourself open to feeling like you're having the same conversations again and again and again, because you kind of are just with different questions, different topics, different points of view.
Yes. And that goes back to something that we were talking about before we pushed record today. And it was, when is the right time to approach some of these topics? Because I know I have to be ready to have a conversation, but I also know that when I'm ready might not be when my boyfriend is ready. So as the female side of the relationship, when is the right time to approach my partner about a topic? And when I was married in my past relationship, I wanted to approach things and talk about things right away. And he would be pulling away, retreating and pulling away, going into that internal reflection. And I mean, let's put a picture in your head. I would follow him around the house, beating the pan with the spoon, going, listen to me right now. We got to talk about this. Or what's wrong? Or you need to tell me what's going on. Or you're having a hard time. Talk to me, talk to me, talk to me. And what I have learned is that is really not the right time to approach and have those conversations. Because if you are with somebody, and again, this happens a lot on the side of the other party, women not so much, because again, a lot of times we talk to process things. But with men, when they're coming back out of that retreat is the right time to talk about things. And oftentimes we feel like when they're coming back out of that retreat, they're going to come out and they're going to act like nothing is wrong. And they're going to come in and they're going to hug us and they're going to kiss us and they're going to want to be all close and they're going to, like, the problem solved, right? They retreated inside internally and they fixed the problem and there's nothing more to say. And I don't have to talk about it because I fixed it. And we had chased them in and we had pushed all of their buttons on the way in, and it just causes them to pull away and pull away and pull away. But the right time to actually talk about things and ask those questions and get that clarification and get that reassurance that maybe you're needing is when they come back out and they are ready to re-engage with you and become closer in that relationship. Because at this point, they've processed through everything and they have the answers that you're looking for. Whereas on the other side, before they've had the time to process it, they don't have the answers that you're looking for. And it feels like we're irritating them. And then we as women, or we as whoever it is in the relationship, take that very personally and feel like our relationship is falling apart when really it probably has nothing to do with us.
Don't send the "we need to talk" text, because as an anxious person, that just blows up my entire day. And because I don't know if it annoys my boyfriend or not, but there have been times where I'm like, I feel like we need to talk about like the state of our relationship or something like, but giving like some idea, because I don't like to be blindsided. And I think that's my thought behind, you can approach this saying, hey, when you're ready to talk, shoot me a text or let me know. Or if you need to talk about something, say, hey, I think we need to sit down and talk about this, so that you're not blindsiding a person, being like, okay, welcome. Let me grab your lunchbox and put your briefcase down. Now we're going to talk about the fact that, and then you just kind of like dump this topic on them. So I think there are ways that you can maybe set yourself up to, hey, we both want to talk about this. Let's set a specific time for this, so that somebody who maybe needs to go inside and process can do that. Somebody who wants to talk about it right away has a time and a date and a space where we know we're going to talk about this. And then that hopefully can relieve a little bit of pressure on both sides. We're like, I'm getting my time to think. The person who really wants to talk about it knows that it's coming. It's not going to be a surprise to them either. And it's kind of like sex. Why do we think we can't schedule these things? It doesn't have to be this like random spur thing when you're sitting down to dinner. Schedule time for this so that both people come prepared. And I think you walk away with a much better result than if one person is just blindsided by this major topic.
I would totally agree with that 110%, especially if you are that person that needs that resolution immediately, because it's not fair for one party to have their needs met and not to say that you should put your needs on the back burner because you need to have this conversation. This topic is all about understanding how the opposite sex communicates and where some of those breakdowns are. But that's a really great meet in the middle compromise, is saying, I'll give you your space, you can take your space, but let's tell me when I can expect to have this conversation and be able to get to a resolution for me too, because I need to have my needs met as well.
Yes. Anything else we need to cover?
I don't think so. I think, if you are having communication differences with your significant other, or if you are wondering about communication differences in the sexes, please drop us a line at soyou'readytodate@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you and talk about any communication styles or different ways to communicate and bridge some of these gaps that you have questions on. And we will be back next week with another great topic.